Hey everybody, Justin Dunaway here with the Institute of Clinical Excellence, and today I want to talk about the concept of normalizing the flare-up. But first I want to do a quick shout out to Zach Long, the barbell physio, the barbell physio, who taught his the Institute of Clinical Excellence Fitness Athlete Live seminar this weekend in Portland, Oregon. It's the first chance I've had to get out to that course. And whether you are treating fitness athletes in a CrossFit box or you're trying to teach grandma to pick up her grandkid off the floor and overhead, the ability to look at the breakouts in the performance of Olympic lifts and complex movement patterns is applicable to all parts of physical therapy, and this was a phenomenal course. I learned so much, had an awesome weekend, so thanks to Zach and the Fitness Athlete Live crew for putting together such an awesome course. And at that course, we were talking at lunch about some persistent pain patients, because that's sort of my jam. And the question that was asked to me is, how do you avoid the flare up with the patient, or how do you avoid when the patient has a symptom flare that's being associated with physical therapy or being blamed on what happened in the clinic that day? And it was kind of framed around a conversation about a patient who's a persistent pain patient, was very very high physical irritability, very low tolerance, and had she was doing 2 or 3 minute sessions on the bicycle, and then as those were going well, the program got bumped up to about 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and that was enough to cause a significant enough flare-up that the patient canceled all the remaining appointments. And I know that's happened to all of us, myself included, where you think things are going well, you start to increase the intensity, and then the wheels fall off the track, and the patient believes that physical therapy caused them more pain, more damage, more problems, and they left physical therapy. So how do I handle that situation? And for me, you have to get into it on the front end. You have to normalize the flare before the flare occurs. So when I think about that, there's basically 2 things I think about when I try to get patients to think differently about changes in symptoms throughout their course of care. First is the concept of normalizing the flare, and then the second is really doing everything we can to put the patient in the driver's seat for function and functional progression. And I start here with this little graph. I apologize for those of you that aren't watching the video, but so there's the graph that I've got a little whiteboard in my office, and a conversation I have with my patients very early on is this this idea of pain versus function. And I pulled this graph out of Louis Gifford's Aches and Pains text. For those of you that listen to me have heard me talk, I reference these texts very often. Louis Gifford's Aches and Pains is a phenomenal pain treatment resource. But this is a really cool graph that's in there, and I just pull out the whiteboard and I draw this out real fast. That top wavy line going from the top left to the bottom right is pain, and then the same wavy line from the bottom left to the top right is function. And then this occurs over time, right? So what I tell the patients right off the bat is the first thing I want you to see is these 2 lines are inversely proportional. The more pain you have, the less you function, and the less you function, and the more you function, the less pain you have. Now, the thing that's different about this clinic, the thing that's going to be different about this experience than any experience you've had thus far, is that every clinician you've had so far, and especially with persistent pain patients, they've had PT, they've had chiro, they've had acupuncturists, they've got 3 PCPs, they've got a primary care physician, they've got their pain management specialist and their ortho doc, and every single provider has given you treatments that have focused on that top line. Everything that's been done to you up to this point has focused on pain. The thing that we're going to do here in this clinic that's going to be different is we're going to focus on function. We're going to be respectful of your pain, but we're really going to work to figure out where we can start, where we can toe in on that bottom line and drive that bottom line up over time. And as we get further down that function line, you're going to have less and less pain. So that's the very first thing we do, because we got to get patients to think less about their pain and more about the function. But to get into this idea of the flare-ups and normalizing the flare-ups, the second thing I want the patients to see here is that those are not straight lines. It's not a straight line from beginning to end. There are peaks and valleys all the way down that line, multiple peaks and multiple valleys. And what I always tell the patient is that, before you got here, you know that you've had good days and you've had bad days. And the days that you are feeling good, you can do a little bit more. The days that you're having a flare-up, the days that you're not feeling great, you do a little bit less. But it seems like those peaks and valleys occur without rhyme or reason. You've had a million of them over the last 10 years, and you can't really pin down what flared you up and what didn't. So now that we're in physical therapy, and we're going through stuff, and we're driving our function forward and working on things in the clinic, you're still going to have those peaks and valleys. As we look back at this graph over time, what you're going to see is that the overall trajectory is in the right direction, but in specific snapshots, you may be having a flare-up. But I just want you to remember that you were having these flare-ups long before you ever got here. So it's very possible that that flare has nothing to do with what happened in the clinic, and it was just going to occur. Now, with that being said, now that we're going to expect that flares occur and we're going to have the conversation about flares before a flare-up ever happened in the clinic, now we got to talk about coping strategies, right? And this is where I'll start to ask patients lots of questions about, when they have a flare-up, what do they do? What do they think is occurring during that flare-up? That Monday morning when you wake up and your back and legs are just really crampy and achy and hurting way more than they were 2 days before, what do you think changed? What happened? And when that flare clears, what was the change there? What I really want to do is get a handle on the patient's beliefs, because a lot of times we'll be able to find discrepancies in there where we can get the patient to start to tell us things that show them that they don't necessarily equate these flares with damage. And it's really important for them to understand that the flare doesn't mean any change in structural pathology. And then we're going to help them come up with some coping mechanisms, right? Because one of the things that we want to know is, what do they do when they have a flare? And a lot of times they're very passive things. They're going to take a bunch of medications. They're going to throw on the ice pack. They're going to go lay in the recliner for a couple days. These are the things that we want to avoid. So what we need to do is figure out what their beliefs are, move their beliefs in a more positive direction, and then give them adaptive coping strategies. Talking to them about whatever the current activity level is. Let's back down that activity level a little bit, but we're going to remain active. What I don't want you to do is climb into that lazy boy all day. And then we're going to have things that we've identified throughout our course of care that we used early on to calm down some of their pain and get them a little bit more active. And we're just going to revert back to those early day exercises. Maybe some gentle repetitive range of motion stuff, some deep breathing techniques, some mindfulness techniques. Whatever we've identified early on that was helpful to get them past that stage when they showed up and they were unable to do a whole lot of stuff. These are the things that we're going to fall back on during a flare. But giving the patients an expectation that flares are going to occur throughout our course of care, one, it takes the fear out of it. It normalizes a little bit. And then giving the patient active coping strategies, things that they can do when this occurs, it puts some of the control back in the hands of the patient, which when you have control over your situation, it's less scary. You have more hope. It changes the neural processing that changes the sensitivity of the nervous system, which moves the pain along a little bit faster. So we're going to get them to expect it, and we're going to give them some tools to manage it. The other thing that we need to do that helps to kind of put some of the onus on the patient so that they don't necessarily blame the clinic or blame the things that are moving them in the right direction as the flare-up, because the last thing we want is for a patient to feel like conservative management isn't helping and to drop out. Because when a persistent pain patient, or an acute pain patient for that matter, fails conservative management, we all know what path that goes down. So we've really got to do everything we can to make sure they don't believe that conservative management isn't the answer for them. So after we normalize the flare, the second thing that we've got to get good at is doing everything we can to put the patient in the driver's seat. And what I mean by that is When we decide that Doris is going to be one of the things we're going to work on is grade exposure to cycling tolerance or to walking tolerance or whatever, and we've decided that we're going to start at a 3-minute walk, and then next week we're going to move to a 4-minute walk, and then next week we're going to move to a 5-minute walk. That is me making decisions for the patient. That's me doing to the patient. Even though it's active, I'm still doing things to the patient. We worry so much in physical therapy about our passive modalities making the patient dependent on us. But if we're doing our active modalities to the patient, our active things to the patient, we're still making them dependent on us as well. So how we get around that is during our conversations, when we're setting up our goals and when we're figuring out exactly where we want to take this patient, we're going to do everything we can to put them in the driver's seat for every decision. So what I mean by that is when Doris walks into the clinic, we're going to ask her right off the bat, Doris, what are we going to work on today? And a lot of times she says, I don't know, you're the doctor, and that's fine. But we want to give her the opportunity to pick the tasks. So we'll say, okay, well, maybe how do you feel about working some more on your walking tolerance today? Last time, we walked for about 2 minutes. You seemed like you did pretty well. Do you feel like you're ready for us to move that up a little bit? I'm not going to bump it up. I'm going to ask her if she wants us to bump it up. If she says yes, fantastic. Then I'm going to ask her how much. We did 2 minutes last time. How much do you think we should do this time? Maybe she'll say, let's do 3 minutes. And a lot of times when they give me that next step, I'll scale it back a little bit. I want them to have success. I want to minimize the chance of a flare-up, but I still want to give them the opportunity to make the decisions. If they're always making the decisions and we're just helping guide them, a couple things happen. One, we're, again, just like with the normalizing the flare, we're helping to give them control over their situation. Their whole experience in the healthcare system has been others doing to them. And over time, we tend to strip locus of control away from patients, and they get to a place where anytime something's wrong, they just go into the system, and the system gives them a thing. What we need to do is use this opportunity as graded exposure to internal locus of control and really give the patient back the skills to manage their own condition. And once they get out of the clinic, they then have the skills to continue to drive function forward in the absence of physical therapy, in the absence of us guiding them. So, at the end of the day, our goal is to normalize the patient's symptoms, is to decrease their fear, and is to give the patient the tools and the opportunity to climb back in the driver's seat to move function forward. Any chance we can get to have the patient give us the next step, to give us the next task, to give us the next progression, we really want to capitalize on that. We want to teach the patients to expect the up and down nature of their symptoms, to give them the tools to manage acutely when their symptoms flare up, and to give them the tools to drive their stuff forward. All right. Well, thanks for listening. Lots of stuff like this in the Persistent Pain Management course. If you're interested, the next round is in June. And otherwise, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat bar or shoot me an email. Look forward to seeing you all out there. Have a great day in clinic.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.